This is Math 6, Lesson 6-2, multiplying mixed numbers. Let's say you have a box in your garage, and you want to fill it with some books, but you don't know how big your box is. So you measure your box. Most of the time when you measure objects, they're not going to measure in nice little whole numbers. They're going to have fractions, and those fractions are going to be interesting. Like you might say, oh, look at my box. My box is 2 feet 3 1/8 inches long, 1 foot 4 5/8 inches tall, and 3 feet 2 7/8 inches wide. Multiplying those numbers is going to be a bit more complicated than just multiplying whole numbers. Okay. So today we're going to take a look at how do we multiply mixed numbers. How do we multiply a fraction that's got a whole number part to another fraction that has a whole number part? Okay. Well, one of the first things we should do is we should be able to estimate. If you have two mixed numbers and you want to estimate what their product is going to be, it's best to round the mixed numbers to the nearest whole number first. Because remember, with estimation, we want to make it easy. So we don't want to have fractions while we're doing it. We still want to be able to use something that's going to be quick and easy. So we want to estimate it to the nearest whole number because that makes multiplication easier. Let's take a look at these two problems. If we're going to estimate, if the fraction in a mixed number is 1/2 or greater, you'll round up. If it's not 1/2 or greater, you'll leave the whole number alone. So let's take a look at 5 5/6 times 6 4/9. Well, 5/6, that's more than half because half of 6 is 3. So this is going to round the 5 up, so that's going to round that to a 6th. 4/9, oh, that's slightly less than half because half of 9 is 4.5. So that's going to leave that as 6. So the estimation of 5 5/6 times 6 4/9 is going to be something close to 36. Okay. Later on in the lesson, we might come back to this and actually multiply it to see how close our estimate was. Let's take a look at number 2. 7 11/16. 11/16. Well, half of 16 is 8. So that's going to round this 7 up to an 8. 1/5. Well, 1 is not half of 5. So that keeps my number as a 7. And 8 times 7 rounds to about 56. So a close estimate of 7 11/16 times 7 1/5 is going to be a number that's close to 56. We'll look at this later in the class period and see how close our estimates were to the actual number. Now, to find the product of mixed numbers, that means a mixed number times another mixed number or a mixed number times a fraction, you must rewrite each mixed number as an improper fraction. Each mixed number must be rewritten as an improper fraction. This is critical. If you do not rewrite your mixed numbers as improper fractions, you will not get the correct answer. Okay? You will not. You'll always get the wrong answer. Okay? Most of the students, when they work with me, I notice when they get a mistake, their mistake is they try to multiply fraction part times fraction part and whole number part times whole number part, and that does not work. You must rewrite each mixed number as an improper fraction. So in problem number 1 here, we have 3 1/2 times 1/3. So I must change my 3 1/2 to an improper fraction. Remembering how to do that, we're going to multiply the 2 times the 3 and add the 1. So 2 times 3 is 6, 6 plus 1 is 7. That becomes 7/2. We're going to multiply that by 1/3. Now we will simply multiply straight across the top, multiply straight across the bottom, and we'll get 7/6. That, changed back to a mixed number, is 1 1/6. And oftentimes I get students who look at me and go, but Mrs. Sheline, this does not make sense. How can I take a whole number or a mixed number and multiply it by something and it gets smaller? I thought when we multiplied things together, they got bigger. Not if they're fractions. I am multiplying 3 1/2 times part of a number, not even 1. If I was multiplying 3 1/2 by 1, I should get 3 1/2. But I'm not even multiplying it by 1, I'm multiplying it by 1/3, so I'm multiplying it by a tiny portion of the number 1, which means my answer should be smaller, because I'm taking a mixed number and multiplying it by part of a little bit of a number, which means it should actually get smaller. So don't let that confuse you. Don't let I'm multiplying two numbers together, they must always get bigger, mess with your head, because a fraction times a fraction should get smaller. Let's look at number 2. 3 3/4 times 2 and 4/5. So both of those are mixed numbers, so I need to change both of those now to an improper fraction. So if I take 3 3/4 and I'm going to multiply it by 2 4/5, I need to change 3 3/4 to a mixed number. 4 times 3 is 12. Remember, 4 times 3 is 12. Add the 3. That's 15. Put it over 4. I'm going to multiply that by 5 times 2 is 10. 10 plus 4 is 14. 14 over 5. Now, if at all possible, you always want to see if you can change things to cross-cancel them. So I'm going to look here and see if I can cross-cancel anything, and I can. I look at this and go, 5 goes into itself once, it goes into 15 3 times. 4 does not divide into 14, but 2 does, divides into 4 and 14. So I can say, 2 goes into 4 twice, and 2 goes into 14 7 times. Now I simply multiply straight across the top and straight across the bottom. So I can say, okay, 3 times 7 over 2 times 1. That makes 21 over 2, which I now need to change back into a mixed number. 21 halves. 2 goes into 2 once. 2 does not go into 1. So it becomes 10 1/2. If you can do that part in your head, I'm fine with that. If not, write it out like I showed it right there to make sure that you are doing all the proper mathematical procedures. So as you can clearly see, when we multiplied a mixed number times another mixed number, it did get bigger. Okay? Let's take a look at a couple more numbers. 3 3/8 times 1 5/9. 3 3/8 times 1 5/9. I could round this. I could estimate it. I didn't do that to the last one. I probably should have. So let's do a little estimate really quick. 3 is not half of 8, so we would keep the 3 as a 3. So my estimate is going to be 3 times 5 is greater than 4 1/2, so 2. So my estimate should be somewhere around 6. Let's see how close we are with our final answer when we multiply these two fractions together. Okay, 8 times 3 is 24. 24 plus 3 is 27. So we have 27/8. 9 times 1 is 9. 9 plus 5 is 14, so that becomes 14/9. Can I cross-cancel? Yes, I can. 9 goes into itself once. It goes into 27 3 times. 2 goes into 8 4 times. 2 goes into 14 7 times. Therefore, I have 3 times 7 all over 4. 3 times 7 is 21, so I have 21/4. 21/4, 4 goes into 21 5 times, with 1/4 left over. So my answer is 5 1/4. My estimate was 6, so I'm fairly close. Because remember, with an estimate, you tend to be a little bigger, because you tend to round up more often than you don't round up. So 5 1/4 is close to our estimate of 6, and 5 1/4 is the answer when you take 3 3/8 and multiply it by 1 5/9. Let's take a look at number 4. 10 1/4 times 2 3/4. Change this to an improper fraction. 10 times 4 is 40, plus 1 is 41, so 41/4 times 4 times 2 is 8. 8 plus 3 is 11. 11/4. And you're like, ooh, ick, it doesn't look like anything cross-cancels. No, it doesn't, does it? So this is a bigger problem that we have to do. I know my denominator is going to be 4 times 4. My numerator is going to be 41 times 11, and you're like, ew, I don't want to do all that multiplication. Too bad. You need to do it. So 41 times 11. 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 4 is 4. 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 4 is 4. 1, 5, 4. So it's 451 over 16. Okay, well, 16 goes into 451 a lot of times, I'm sure. Let's figure it out. Some fractions are easy. Some fractions are not. 16 will go into 45. Well, I know 16 times 2 is 32. So I'm saying 2. 5 minus 2 is 3. 4 minus 1 is 1. And 13 is smaller than 16, so that's as many times as it would go in. Bring down my 1. 16 goes into 131. Well, 16 doesn't go into 13. So it's going to go into 131. Probably, think of 20. How many times will 20 go into, let's say, 140? That'd be 7 times. So I'm thinking 7 or 8. So I'm going to go with 8. 6 times 8 is 48. 8 times 1 is 8, plus 4 is 12. 131 minus 128 is 3. So 451/16 is 28 and 3/16. So when we multiply those two numbers together, when we multiply 10 and 1/4 times 2 and 3/4, we get 28 and 3/16. As you can clearly see, it is so much nicer when something cross-cancels. Let's take a look at a little bit of things that we like to do. Evaluate if A is 3/5, B is 1 1/2, and C is 2 2/3. And we're told to do A, B. Remember, when a variable is next to another variable, it implies multiplication. So AB means A times B. A is 3/5, and B is 1 1/2. So the first thing you should do is substitute in your numbers in the proper places. Then do the mathematical procedure. So I have 3/5, and I need to multiply this by 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3, 3/2. Nothing cross-cancels. 3 times 3 is 9, 5 times 2 is 10. Nothing simplifies. I simply have 9/10. Number 6 here. It says A times C. So A is 3/5, and C is 2 2/3. So we would have 3/5 times 3 times 2 is 6, 6 plus 2 is 8, 8/3. Ooh, something cross-cancels this time. 3 goes into itself once, 3 goes into itself once. So I'm going to have 8/5. 8 times 1 is 8, 5 times 1 is 5. Change that to a mixed number. That becomes 1 3/5. Number 7 says we're going to do 3/5 BC, which means we're going to take 3/5 times B times C. So 3/5 times B, which is 1 1/2, times C, which is 2 2/3. Now, the one cool thing about fractions that does not happen with whole numbers is you can multiply a bunch of fractions together all at the same time. With whole numbers, you have to multiply any two whole numbers together, get that answer, and then multiply the third whole number to it. Here, I can multiply all my fractions together at the same time. I just need to make sure they're all in improper fraction form. So 3/5 is fine. 1 1/2, 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3, that becomes 3/2. 2 2/3, 3 times 2 is 6, 6 plus 2 is 8, that becomes 8/3. Now I can cross-cancel if possible. I'm looking at this going, oh yes, I do have some wonderful areas I can cross-cancel. I can cancel this 3 with either one of the two 3's on the top, but I can't do it to both. So I'm going to do it to that one. I can say, oh, 2 goes into itself once, and it goes into 8 4 times. There's nothing else that cross-cancels, so I'm basically going to do 3 times 1 times 4 on the top, and 5 times 1 times 1 on the bottom. 3 times 1 times 4 is 12. 5 times 1 times 1 is 5. So I now have 12/5, which I can change to a mixed number. 5 goes into 12 2 times. That would be 10, and so 12 minus 10 is 2, so 2 2/5. Multiplying mixed numbers. Let's take a look at a word problem. A gear on a machine makes 2 2/3 turns in 1 minute. How many turns does this gear make in 4 1/2 minutes? Okay, so we know that the gear turns 2 2/3 times every minute. If we run the machine for 4 1/2 minutes, how many times is this gear going to turn? That's what we're asking. So basically, we're asking a multiplication problem. So we need to take 2 2/3 and multiply that by 4 1/2. So 2 2/3, change that to an improper fraction. 3 times 2 is 6. 6 plus 2 is 8, so that becomes 8/3. Change 4 1/2 to an improper fraction. 4 times 2 is 8, plus 1 is 9, so that becomes 9/2. Look to see if anything cross-cancels, which in this case it does. I can say, oh, 3 goes into 3 one time, 3 goes into 9 3 times. 2 goes into itself 1 time, 2 goes into 8 4 times. 3 times 4 is 12, 1 times 1 is 1, so my answer is 12. So, in 4 1/2 minutes, the gear will make 12 turns. Okay, so the year makes 12 turns. Always make sure you answer your problems in a complete sentence. All right, let's go back to the first couple of problems I talked about when I said estimating. I said we'd come back to those problems to see how close our final answer was to our estimation. So let's take a look at these two problems. Actually, let's just take a look at one. Let's just take a look at the first one. 5 and 5 6 times 6 and 4 9s. We're actually going to multiply that together. 5 and 5 6 times 6 and 4 9s. Change them to improper fractions. 6 times 5 is 30, plus 5 is 35. So 35 sixths times 6 times 9 is 54, plus 4 is 58, over 9. You're like, ew, ick. Well, we can do a little cross-canceling. Because I know that 6 58s can at least reduce by 2. 2 goes into 6 3 times. 2 goes into 58, let's see. 2 goes into 5 twice. 1 remaining. 2 goes into 18 9 times, so this has got to be 29. And nothing else reduces, so now I have to take 35 times 29 on the top, and on the bottom I have to do 3 times 9. Okay, so 35 times 29, I'm just going to do this over here. So if I do 35 times 29, 5 times 9 is 45, carry my 4, 9 times 3 is 27, plus 4 is 31, 2 times 5 is 10, 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 is 7, so 5, 1, 0, 1, so 1015 divided by 9 times 3 is 27. You're like, oh no, I now have to do more division. So 27 goes into 1015. Well, think of 27 as 30. How many times will 30 go into 100? Because I have 27 into 1015. So I'm going to go 30 into 100. So I'm thinking, oh, probably 3, 6, 90, 30, 60, 93 times. So we'll go with 3 there. 7 times 3 is 21. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 2 is 8. So we'll do 101 minus 81, that's 20. That works. Bring down my 5. Now I'm thinking of how many times will 30 go into 205? Let's see. Or how many times will 30 go into 205? That's fine. So if you think about it for a minute, 30 going into 205, 30 times 7 is 210, but I'm a little bit lower, so I'm going to go with 7. 7 times 7 is 49. 7 times 2 is 14. Plus 4 is 18. Aha! That worked pretty well. If I borrow, 15 minus 9 is 6. 9 minus 8 is 1. So I have 37 and 16/27ths. That is an ugly fraction, but it works. What was our estimate? Go back up here. Our estimate was around 36. So 37 is close to 37 and 16/27 is close to 36. Okay, we are fairly accurate here with our answer. That's why you should probably, at least in your head, estimate, so that when you get your final answer, if you're off by like 10 or 15, you're going to know you did something wrong. All right, this ends lessons on multiplying mixed numbers.